executives in any organization, large or small, governmental, business, non-profit, all of them, need to be seen as addressing themselves and working themselves on the key challenges. And so the next step in being an effective executive is to think through. It's always an enormous list of 40 people, 40 things. And nobody can do more than one or two at a time. And so an effective executive sets priorities and sticks. By definition, executives work in an organization. And we really have barely learned to walk. We're still toddlers in organizations. Large organizations are not much more than 100 years old. And we are slow learners. But we know enough to see what an executive has to do and has to stop doing if he or she wants to be effective executives in an organization. And perhaps the first thing to say is that they have to make themselves understood.
Todos nós ainda acreditamos estar vivendo num mundo parecido com os exércitos de ontem. Todos são treinados para fazer exatamente a mesma coisa e apenas os números ficam maiores. E, portanto, podemos supor que os mais graduados sabem o que os menos graduados estão fazendo porque já passaram por isso.
If you look at today's organization, business, hospital, university, government, no two people have the same background, basically. And you can no longer take for granted that they understand what their neighbor is doing or that they have been on that job. Here is the head of market research, and he may have come out of the advertising agency, and he has never done any selling or any pricing or any customer service, and yet he's now accountable for. And so in an organization, executives have to take responsibility. I think it's important to ask, what can an executive do today to prepare himself or herself to be effective tomorrow? One of the things we know is that the next, I don't know how many years, but long years, will be turbulent years because the speed of change is so great.
Se conversarmos com especialistas em dados demográficos, ficaremos sabendo que no mundo industrializado há uma greve de bebês, pois na Espanha, Itália, Grécia, Portugal e sul da França praticamente não nascem mais bebês. E a previsão é de que o Japão, dentro de 60 anos, terá aproximadamente metade da população atual, porque nascem muito poucas crianças. Por outro lado, o número de pessoas idosas está aumentando muito rapidamente nos países desenvolvidos.
So you can predict that in the developed countries, demographics will become a major issue. And yes, in developed countries, but perhaps not yet in emerging countries. We will have to learn to work with people very much older than we used to work with, because the idea, even in the US, that you can retire at 65 is no longer tenable. And that's a major change. But also, the business enterprise has come to play quite a new role. Economically, the world is becoming increasingly integrated. Politically, it's becoming increasingly splintered. And the business enterprise is very much in the middle. One of the major mistakes of my professional life is that I invented the term profit center. There is no such thing. Inside a business, there are only cost centers. The only profit center is the customer whose check hasn't bounced. And we know nothing about the outside. The retail people know more than anybody else because when that housewife pays at the checkout counter, there's a record. When you I work a lot with hospitals. It is very hard to figure out the outside, let alone results. When you make a part to be assembled by one of your customers, you may know a lot about that customer, but you know almost nothing about his customers. And yet his customers are your ultimate customers. Because if that direct customer of yours can't sell his automobile he manufactures, you don't get an order either. And so one of the important tasks for the executive head is to try to obtain more knowledge about the outside, both geographically and topically.
Na década de 50, empregados eram vistos como elementos passivos e não ativos. Grande erro das empresas em focarem somente na mão de obra braçal e não intelectual. A confiança e o respeito pelo trabalhador passaram a ser elementos essenciais para o crescimento das empresas. Peter Drucker afirmava que a empresa que conseguir vender o produto certo para o cliente certo, distribuição adequada, preço justo e no momento ideal, teria seus esforços de vendas reduzidos a zero, tornando a venda automática em função da demanda trabalhada. Além, Peter Drucker veio a falecer em 2005 na Califórnia aos 95 anos de idade. Nos deixa grandes ensinamentos envolvendo a disciplina da inovação, liderança eficaz e autogerenciamento. Ele tinha essa capacidade de interpretar dados presentes no mundo dos negócios e prever suas aplicações no futuro, tanto que foi intitulado o Guru do Management, rótulo que sempre rejeitou. Para Drucker, se você quer algo novo, você precisa parar de fazer algo velho. E planejamento de longo prazo não lida com decisões futuras,